it sounds to me that one of the things that you and your wife figured out is that you should take a leap into the unknown to the spot that beckons, right? And those are those things that call to you, you said unconsciously, that won't go away, that won't stop bugging you like Jiminy Cricket, your conscience calling you to. That's what you're supposed to put faith in. And that's part of the classic representation of God in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Like, God is the voice of conscience. That's what the prophet Elijah establishes. He's not out in nature. He's not in the thunder. He's not in the earthquake, right? He's not Gaia. He's not even the cosmos. God is what beckons to you from conscience and what calls to you. And you ignore that at your peril. In your song, you said hell on earth is like, hell on earth is where you go if you don't pay attention to what your conscience tells you and to what beckons. And that's the truth. And it's also the case, if you get tangled up into that routine you hate, that industrial routine, predictable industrial generic routine, and you're pissed off going to work and you're giving everyone the finger and you're resentful and bitter, like you're one step away from wanting to turn everything into hell just to get revenge for your miserable life. That's the story of Cain, by the way, because it's Cain's descendants, right? Cain gets bitter, and it's Cain's descendants that first make weapons of war. In the aftermath of Cain's descendants, well, the thing that happens after the things that happen after the story of Cain and Abel, right? The fratricide and then the degeneration into murderousness is the flood that wipes everything out, and also the Tower of Babel, which is this terrible technological construction that you were referring to, this terrible generica, mindless generica that's spread everywhere, that posits a mere technological solution, a technocratic solution to every problem. Those are two various forms of hell. And this is very real, and well, it's real enough to base your life on.
I believe that's what we're experiencing today. Like, I think that what you said is exactly what's happened today. And when I look at Republicans and Democrats in 2023, that's what I see. Is I see people who are bitter and angry and disgusted with a system that isn't serving anyone correctly. But instead of us being able, in the same way that in a business, someone with a more conservative mindset and someone with a more liberal mindset could use entrepreneurial and like traditional and organizational skills to build a strong business, which is what we should be doing in our political climate and in our country. We're using our bitterness as a weapon against each other. It's been interesting. I think obviously a lot of people understand what it is I'm trying to say or what my message is within the song, but it has been interesting seeing both sides also attack me, misinterpreting that I'm identifying with the other. I've had, for example, I've had, even just recently, I've had some conservatives give me grief for making the comment that we're stronger or something to the, this was in the middle of a concert, and it was, I think I said strength through diversity, which really resonates on exactly what that point is, that we need to have people that think differently use those strengths to work together in a way that makes us all stronger. But I think people are so used to hearing that as a sort of a left-wing rhetoric that they immediately identified it as that. And then on the flip side, I've had the left very much attacking me as being sort of this right-wing, far right-wing, whatever, and you've experienced this yourself. But at some point, we've got to figure out a way to for us as a society, maybe find a way to leap out of that. Like what we're facing in today's world is much bigger than that. That is important. It's important that we have politics and that we have a system in which we decide how different ideas are implemented into government, but it can't rule us either. Like we've allowed it to not sit here at the wayside, but we've allowed it to almost encapsulate all of us. Like it's become sort of the ceiling under which we live under. And, I've had people say that I'm a fence sitter and that I need to have some sort of call to action. And I guess like if there's anything that I would respond to that with, given the opportunity we have now, it's like, I think we need to take a step back and re-envision what we want the next 20 or 30 years to look like. And there's an important verse that came to mind. This is in Matthew 22, starts in 34, but it's where the Pharisees are questioning Jesus on, like, because even throughout the Bible, there are contradictions, obviously, and people have different forms of opinion and different ways things are worded even throughout the Bible. But he says, a Pharisee asked Jesus, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself." And like, as simple as that is, if we could just find a way to make those two commandments, even outside of religious boundaries, if we could learn to make that our priority and then base our differences below that, like God is here, our love for each other here, and then below that is try to find a way to integrate our differences in a way that everyone can live a better life. Like, it would resolve a lot of the conflicts that have become like way overcomplicated,
If you've listened to us for a while, you know our stance on fluoridation. Today, more than 70% of the U.S. population has fluoride added to their water sources. That is a violation of personal rights, plain and simple. On the Jordan Peterson podcast, you've heard how governments have no problem with mass medicating their populations without consent. On this show, we refuse to drink compromised water. That's why we use Cove Pure. Cove Pure is a countertop reverse osmosis system that filters your water in 4 stages, stripping away fluoride, contaminants, and the arrogance of bureaucrats who think they know what's best for you. Their clear wave reverse osmosis technology is lab certified to remove up to 99% of impurities, leaving you with only the purest water possible. And unlike the government, Cove Pure lets you have your water exactly the way you want it. It has a simple touchscreen that lets you choose the exact amount or temperature that you want. Hot, cold, warm, whatever. Cove Pure does it all instantly with the tap of a button. Not only does it look amazing, the best part is that there's no need to drill into pipes or call a plumber. You just set up Cove Pure right on your countertop, fill it up with water, and plug it in. Your health shouldn't come at the cost of your autonomy. Purify your water today with the same system that Jordan uses. And because we've partnered with Cove Pure, you'll get $200 off if you use our link in the description box, covepure.com/Jordan.
You pointed to, in some ways, I don't know if you could call that the most crucial of lines in the biblical corpus, but it's damn close, because what's happening in that story, as you no doubt know, is that the Pharisees, the scribes, the lawyers, they're kind of the political class, right? They're the privileged class. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to trap Christ into making a heretical statement so they can kill him, essentially, or at least throw him in prison. That's the plan. So they've set up traps, which is exactly what that question is. And he does this incredible sleight of hand, which is a mark of staggering brilliance. Instead of taking the 10 Commandments, which are the law, right? The Moses established law, and saying, well, this one's, what they want him to do is say, well, it's number 4 that's most important, because then they can say, well, you don't think number 1 through 3 or 5 through 10 is important, and so it's off to prison with you, buddy. And so they think they've trapped him because they put him in a place where there's nothing he can say that won't get him in trouble. And what he does is conduct a little revolution ethically right then and there and say, well, if you arrange those 10 commandments and you abstracted out the gist, the essence, it would be twofold. And one of the essences is that you should put the thing that should be at the top. And that's God, and that's the Logos. And that's the truthful speech that, when uttered, changes possibility into the order that is good. That's what the Logos is. That has to be at the top. It's the same as putting freedom of speech and religion at the top. It's the same idea. And that love of God then becomes the expression of the fact that human beings are made in the image of God. That has to be at the top. And then allied with that, Christ says, so that's the vertical dimension. It's like the vertical dimension of Mount Sinai. That's the vertical dimension. You look up, you aim up. And then the horizontal dimension, the collective dimension, is you have to understand that everyone else is a reflection of the same divine value that characterizes you.
Yes.
You have to treat everyone else. And I've been trying to work through that technically. And it's like, I don't think there is any difference between treating yourself properly and treating other people properly. And part of the reason for that is purely practical. It's like, think about it this way. You are very badly outnumbered. There's one of you and 8 billion other people. And so if you mistreat other people, if you put yourself first, that is going to come to haunt you, man, in a way you can't possibly imagine. Whereas if, by contrast, you treat other people as if they're as valuable as you in every interaction you have, people are going to be so thrilled to have you around that they're going to be extending you the same luxury constantly. And so perversely, by stopping focusing on your own narrow self-interests and by inviting other people into the game, everyone will have more and so will you. And I actually think that's technically true, partly because, you know, you said earlier in our conversation that people have this difficulty when they have to sacrifice the present for the future, right? And the thing is when you start to think about the future, what you're doing is saying, well, the 50-year-old me, you know, the me that's 10 years down the road, is just as important as the me that's here right now. And so is the 60-year-old me. And so you have to construe yourself as a community that iterates across time. And then you have to take that whole community into account. And if you do that, it's the same as taking other people into account. And it's the proper moral orientation. And it's not proper for arbitrary reasons. It's proper because if everyone did that, the world would become peaceful and abundant, and we could live in something approximating harmony. And many of the problems that beset us would, merely as a consequence of the better governance that would emerge, many of the problems that are plaguing us would vanish. You know, we've been working on this enterprise in London called the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, trying to develop a vision for the future. Let me tell you one thing about it and ask you what you think about it. So we've been trying to figure out how you tell the real leaders, you know, let's say someone comes to you and says, I've got a vision for the future. And you might say, well, those are kind of a dime a dozen. How the hell do I know that you're not just another manipulator or, you know, in it for your own narrow purposes? How do I know I can trust you? And so I've been trying to work through that. So here's some possibilities. You tell me what you think about this. So I would say if the person who's developing the vision is trying to impose their vision on you by force, then they're not good leaders. And if they're trying to terrify you into adopting their vision, so they use fear, then they're not good leaders. They're good leaders if they offer you a vision like you offered your wife, which is, here's a possible game. What do you think of it? And would you like to voluntarily play? If someone can do that, then they're a leader you can trust. At least, you know, assuming they're playing a straight game. And so the rule is, if the person is using power and compulsion or fear, then their vision is unreliable. And so I think that's even true if there is a crisis. You don't get to terrify people. They have to invite them. So what do you think about that? What's your first response to that?
Yeah, I think that I'd say that it's obvious that at the core of anyone's motive is really it's either love or hate. It's either that it's something that's obviously benefiting people, that people are excited to promote themselves. But then there are a lot of things you see implemented that are they can be very well disguised, but at their core they are fear-based. You know, like either in a sense of intimidation or in a sense of maybe false sense of urgency. Like I've experienced that myself now, just with my career opportunities. Like, you've got to do this now, and it's perceived in a way that's supposed to be helping me, but it really is it's driven off the human emotion of fear. And so I think that's the way to ultimately understand if something is, like in your case, if something is genuine and authentic,
the
or
real
not,
thing
is what human emotion is it being driven off of? Is it being driven off of love and ambition, or is it being driven more off of hate and fear? I mean, that's really the core of everything in the world, right? But I'd say that's
Yeah.
trying to dissect that is a whole nother animal, but ultimately everything,
it is.
it's all driven off of everything's driven off of very basic emotion, I'd say at its core,
Well, and you said false sense of urgency. I actually think this even applies in a true sense of urgency, because the climate people, for example, might say, oh my God, there's an apocalyptic catastrophe pending. It's real. And it's so urgent that here are the following measures must be taken. Okay. So we could take that argument. We could say, well, look, even if it is a true emergency, let's give you that. Which isn't something I'm generally willing to do, by the way. But in any case, well, for the sake of argument, we'll say, okay, there is an actual emergency here. I would still say, if your response to that emergency is that you're now willing to wield fear as the cudgel of power, then you're too little a man for the job. Is that if the crisis has terrified you into becoming a tyrant, then you're facing a dragon that you can't defeat. And so you're not the right guy. I think even when there is a crisis, you should lead people with faith and hope and not with power and fear. And that's a way of distinguishing the real true leaders, let's say, from the false prophets, so to speak.
Absolutely.
That's how it looks to me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Hey,
absolutely.
so I wanted to ask you about Rogan. Just out of curiosity, you went on his show. I've been there 3 or 4 times. I've got to know Joe a little bit. What was that like for you? And what do you think of Rogan?
I love Rogan's really cool. He's just and not, like I said, I've met so many of my heroes, I guess you'd say. They're all just very down to earth people, like, which is refreshing to see that, you hear horror stories about certain people presenting a sort of characterization to the world of being one thing, but then behind closed doors, there's